Hello from London, Gareth here, and I'm very pleased to be having another conversation with Tetsu Yung, who I spoke to recently about LangFest in Montreal. He's one of the organisers, and welcome back, Tetsu. It's nice to see you.
Thank you for having me again.
And what I wanted to talk about this time was about Tetsu's own language learning, and then moving on in another video, part 2, we're going to talk about bringing up kids, raising kids multilingually, because that's one of the things that Tetsu's well known for among those of us who are in the sort of online language community and listening to talks and attending language enthusiasts events such as LangFest. But Tetsu, you are from Hong Kong originally, winding up in Montreal via Taiwan and picking up languages along the way. Is that right?
Yes. The quick answer is yes, but definitely would have to develop on that a little bit, because I think it's a little misleading if we say I'm from Hong Kong, because I was born there. And that's pretty much it. So I was born in Hong Kong. My father is from Taiwan and my mother is Japanese. So they met in Hong Kong. I was born, but before my first birthday, I was back. No, the whole family was back in Taiwan. Okay. So of all the languages I speak, I don't speak Cantonese. It's a shame, but yeah, that's how it is. But I did grow up in Taiwan. So until I was 13, I was living in Taiwan, after which I went to Canada in the province of Quebec.
So what was the linguistic environment when you were during your first 13 years in Taiwan?
So my father being Taiwanese, so growing up in Taiwan, the language there is Mandarin. That's the official language in Taiwan. And then my mother being Japanese, I would use Japanese with my mother. So these two were the first languages that I learned as a kid. That was what's spoken at home. In Taiwan, if you step outside, 75% of the people speak Taiwanese. So that's a third language that I had to pick up when I was a kid. And my father, he's from, I guess, the middle area of Taiwan called Hsinchu. And in that area, people speak Hakka. So I would speak Hakka with my grandparents. So that was the fourth language. And then when I went to kindergarten, so my parents put me into an American kindergarten. So I had to speak English at school. So by the time I was 13, I was fully immersed and exposed to these 5 languages that I had to use daily.
And so you were using Hakka. Hakka's spoken on mainland China as well, isn't it? Is that right?
Yes, I understand that it's was it Hokkien? Not too sure.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, I don't really.
Yeah.
I didn't really study the language per se, so I know how to use it, but I've never really studied that, and I've never studied Taiwanese. In fact, I've never studied Mandarin either.
So Hakka you spoke with your grandparents then? And
yes, my grandparents would, when I go visit, they all speak Hakka, and so that's how I picked it up as a kid.
And is your vocabulary there mainly? Sorry. Is your vocabulary there mainly sort of domestic then? Because you wouldn't have studied through Hakka or
exactly.
sort of casual conversation.
Yeah, it's just very conversational. Have you had lunch? How to get from here to there? It's raining outside. That kind of thing.
Do your grandparents speak Mandarin as well, or Taiwanese?
Yes. I mean, Taiwanese is it's a big language that most people at least understand. I mean, it's just widely used in Taiwan. Hakka, much less. But so my grandparents, relatives on my father's side would use Hakka all the time. So really, it's in the family.
Is it the norm in Taiwan for people to be multilingual? Was there anything special about this background of yours?
Multilingual, at least bilingual. So Taiwanese and Mandarin is very, very widespread. And if you're from that middle area, like I said, Hakka would come in to a lot of people's families. Um, and then if you studied English, many Taiwanese, uh, at school would have to learn English. So to a certain degree, they can understand some. And I would say they're very good at using whatever vocabulary that they have. So they're very outgoing people. So Taiwanese people pick up languages, I think, pretty well.
Are Taiwanese and Hakka quite close to Mandarin Chinese, or are they incomprehensible?
I would say incomprehensible. It's quite different, quite different. People who speak Taiwanese would not understand Hakka. I don't think.
Yeah, and Taiwanese Mandarin is also a big
It's actually it's very different,
yeah.
very different.
It's one of the things I've wondered was from the perspective of somebody who wants to learn Mandarin, for example. Some people go off to Taiwan to study Mandarin. And yet on the street, Taiwanese, it sounds as if Taiwanese is the dominant language. If you were going to start Mandarin from scratch as an adult, would you recommend somebody to go to Taiwan to do that, or should they be going to mainland China?
Oh wow, that's I think that's a very personal question. It really depends. Uh, uh, I don't know. I can't say I would recommend one over the other. I mean, being Taiwanese, of course, I'm biased to say, go to Taiwan. But I mean, if you're a businessman and you want to do business with China, then definitely, by all means, go to China and learn the accent over there. Vocabulary wise, there's quite a lot of differences. So like the French in Quebec and the French in France, it's quite different. So I think it depends on your purpose. The why you are learning Mandarin.
That's such an important thing, it seems to me, always in language learning, isn't it? That you should do not
Definitely.
what you ought to do, but what you actually
Ex
need and want to do, and
Well, there you go.
learn for the purposes that you have for the language.
Yes.
Um,
Without that, I think it'll be very tough. I mean, the language itself is very tough, but
yes.
any language, I think you need that motivation and
Yeah.
that drive. Yeah, so.
And if you did decide to come to Taiwan, say you're in Taipei, then you're doing a Mandarin course on the
Mhm.
street, in the media and so on. Would you find there's a lot of Mandarin about that you could function? You wouldn't feel that you were sort of part of being cut out from a lot of what's going on in that society.
Uh, I'm not too sure if I understand. So you mean if you, as a foreigner, you go to Taiwan,
To
would you
learn
feel
Mandarin, if you go
yes?
to the shops, if you're
Hmm.
watching the news, is it going to be in Mandarin? Will you be able to
Yes.
use that Mandarin outside?
Uh, think so. I think a lot of what you would learn in text. Once again, I've never really
You've never
learned the
tried,
language,
yes, yeah. So
so I would, but I think it's quite standard. Especially I think in Taiwan, the accent is quite like it's a standard, good, easy to understand accent. I think.
yeah, and
I
people
think.
speak that. Then it's not the equivalent of going to Paris to learn English or something. For
Yeah.
example,
Well, there you
when you
go.
come out on the
Yeah,
street and everybody's speaking French.
yeah. I think if you take the extreme example, if you learn French from a textbook and go to Quebec, you'll probably have a very tough time,
Yes.
uh, given the very different accent. It's not the standard French that you would learn in text and most of the material out there. So, whereas if you learn Mandarin on, I think most public material, I would say you would understand most of it. But like any language, when you pick up a textbook, obviously there are things that are very quite different when when it's spoken. It's not really the accent per se, but the vocabulary or how to use and the slangs, I guess. So that part's inevitable. But relatively speaking, I think you'll do pretty good in Taiwan.
So go with a view to your need and your purpose. Basically, decide
There you go.
what you want to learn. So you were there till you were 13, and then
Yes.
you move to Montreal, and you don't speak any
Yeah.
French at this stage.
At this stage, I knew how to say we. and no. So I tried to answer all the questions that was thrown at me with those two answers, but it wasn't easy when they asked me how old I was and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I went after my elementary school. So first year in high school, I started in Quebec, and I went there because my aunt, so the youngest sister, my father's youngest sister, was living in Quebec. So I had a place to stay, and I went there, and then the rest is history. I stayed. I liked it. I loved it so much. Instead of me going back to Taiwan, I had my parents come to Canada, and everybody immigrated there. And now we all hold Canadian passports.
And you use French a lot in your daily life, presumably.
Yes. Well, in fact, where I live, it's a completely French town. So I went to a French high school. Other than 1 year in Ottawa, the rest of the years I was in Quebec the whole time. So definitely French is it's the official language in the province. So can't outside of Montreal, it's very hard to survive with just French, with just English.
So you've got to the stage now in adulthood, if we come right to the present, where you have learned Mandarin and Japanese from your parents. So they're the strongest of your two Asian languages, we could say.
Yes.
We've mentioned Hakka and Taiwanese. You've then learnt English from sort of kindergarten age, and so for most of your life, and then also French from being a teenager. So you have these 5 languages which you've learnt naturally, I suppose we might say. That would be fair to say. Now, how does that work with your identity?
It's a nice question.
Yeah, and coming off from that, if you had to choose one of those languages as your core language, could you?
Okay, so first the identity part. I think a definite answer is there's a personality of me that is associated with each language. So I've become a different person with every language I speak, and that's so closely tied to the culture of the language I speak, and it's great. I mean, it's a lot of fun, I guess. It allows me to really get into the circle, so to speak, of every community I want to get into with these languages. So from the identity perspective, I don't have one identity representing all, but I have, I think, a few identities associated to each language. And now to pick out one that English is my strongest language, given that I was educated in this language throughout my life. Is that really representative of who I am? When you say English, which country does it represent? Is it the USA, or is it the UK, or is it Canada, where I live? That's a whole different question in and of itself. But I don't think there's one language that would really represent me. English is the strongest. That there's no doubt. But when I speak Japanese, I'm a completely different person. So I wouldn't want to put one language above any other, I think.
Well, it's good that we don't have to choose at the end of the day. That's one of the joys of learning and speaking many languages. And to come to learning then, you've learned Spanish, I think, as an adult. So that must have been a different experience from the sort of immersion or natural acquisition that you'd experienced earlier on.
Yes, no, you're right. Spanish is the first language that I think that I made an effort, that I said, wow, I want to learn a language. And I went ahead and did it. It is different in that I wasn't living in a Spanish country, just naturally needing Spanish. So what I did was I had one motive at that time. I was 18. I was going to Ecuador to visit a great friend of mine for 2 weeks. So innocently, I just said, why not learn a language? What's spoken in Ecuador? Spanish. All right. So I bought myself these cassettes. Cassettes still exist in those days with a little, guidebook that came with it, grammar book. So I just put those tapes, on a loop and just day in and day out listen to that, and read the little notebook, and that was my first initiation to Spanish. Then I went to Ecuador, thinking that was it. I could talk to the local folks, but reality hit. I was not able to talk. But luckily, I did understand quite a bit, and I think that's really thanks to the French. Lots of verb conjugations, the masculine, feminine, that kind of stuff allowed me to understand quite a bit, especially when I was able to have somebody patient enough to talk to me. So I would have grandma, grandpa with me, and they would be talking to me. They can't speak any English, so they would obviously be speaking Spanish the whole time, but they were very enthusiastic and happy that somebody like me wanted to listen to them. So that's how I started Spanish. Then I came back to Quebec, and then I thought, okay, I need to do something about this to maintain the languages. I made friends at the university. There were Spanish clubs and whatnot, and just went out there, partied with the folks, and I really never took a Spanish course until a few years after that. And I only took a course that was a 3-week course that I thought I could use to get some university credits. But so it was not an academic thing for me, learning Spanish.
And again, there was a clear purpose, and
Yes.
you worked from the language you did know, which helped the French, and
Yes.
sort of jumped in there and went for it, not worrying too much about the finer points or being perfect.
That's right.
Just using it.
Yes. I think that innocence, Steve Jobs says, stay hungry, stay foolish. I think I was pretty foolish, thinking, I could just, read a few books and listen to some cassettes and be able to speak the language fluently. But going to the country really brought me back to earth, in a good way. In a good way, I did see where I was able to understand some stuff, but the speaking was horrible. So that I needed work, and I knew what to work on. When I came back, I targeted that and made friends, and that took care of it.
And you just got to push through, really, I suppose, with the speaking.
Yes.
And yeah,
you really want to. You need to want it.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that motivation is very, very important.
And are there other languages that you've learned since then, or that you have in your sights at the moment?
So any more to learn? Not really, but after Spanish, thinking, okay, I could do this.
There's more.
Yeah, so I picked up. I studied German and Italian at once after my Spanish experience, but like I said, I didn't really have a very strong motivation. I just thought learning languages was fun. I can do this. I could pick up some easy credits, which I did, in fact. Picking up the credits was not the hard part. Getting the A in German or Italian, that's not really hard. But really be able to talk to people and keep a conversation going, that I don't think I did it well. I do have intermediate German as a credit, but to say I can speak German, I don't. And it's really because I don't think I really studied it well enough.
And do you think you might go back to that in future, or is it on hold?
I think it's on an indefinite hold, because I don't have that motivation. I don't see the why I would want to learn German at this point. Other than it's a nice country. I stayed in Germany for a while, because I'm a very practical person, I guess. So most Germans I know speak good English. So I don't see why I would need to learn German at that point. So once I lost the motivation, it just doesn't come back. For me, it's better to, I guess, perfect the ones that I do have. And a lot of the time that I use now that's related to languages, I mean, other than investing in LangFest, is investing in my children. So I spend a lot of time with them rather than learning new languages
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. Well, that's a whole different topic, and as I think it would be great if we came back to that in a separate interview, because I know there'll be people with kids or hoping to have kids who might hope to get some practical advice from you on that one.
All right.
But that yours is a fascinating story, and I think what comes through really is the idea of purpose and motivation,
Yes,
and really practical, the use that you need for the languages as a key to success.
I think so. For me, it's, as somebody who does not work per se in the language industry yet, maybe I hope one day, but right now I work in the healthcare industry, so I'm not I don't work in languages every day. So other than interest as a hobby, it's not that strong for me to learn languages per se.
But it's all about using the great riches that you already have.
That is correct.
Yes,
Absolutely.
in your linguistic toolbox. Well, thanks a lot for taking this time to talk to us, Tetsu, and I look forward to our next conversation on raising kids bilingually. And see you again soon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye now.